An unlikely superstar partnership turned three simple chords into the biggest solo hit of a rock icon's career. The story of the making and the major label snubbing of a Tom Petty smash that should have been number one, next on Professor of Rock. Hey music junkies, Professor of Rock, always here to celebrate the greatest artists and the greatest songs of all time. If you want to be a part of the ultimate love letter to the best music of the rock and roll era, the golden era of music, subscribe below right now. To get even more content and even become a curator of this channel, of this history, make sure that you check us out on Patreon. We'd love to have you. Tom Petty met Jeff Lynne in England when Petty was playing with the Heartbreakers as the backup band for the incomparable Bob Dylan. The two became fast friends and collaborated with Dylan, George Harrison, and Roy Orbison in Traveling Wilburys, the super of supergroups, a concept and title that was conceived by Guitar George. Tom and Jeff developed a deep relationship that went well beyond their shared passion and excellence with music. The two legends found that they had much in common, even a love for bowling, which they enjoyed whenever they had the opportunity. Actually, rumor has it that Jeff Lynne is an exceptional bowler. I mean, how great would that have been back in the day? You decide to go bowling and you get to the bowling alley and one of the lanes is occupied with Tom Petty and Jeff Lynne, having a couple of cold ones, throwing strikes. Amazing. In the late 80s, discord festered within the Heartbreakers and the great Tom Petty began to work on his first solo record. Tom turned to Jeff to help him make the record. He loved the sound of George Harrison's Cloud 9 album that Jeff Lynne had just produced. And in fact, he became obsessed with it. He played it over and over again. Long time ago when we was five. Since it was his first solo album and he was at a pivotal crossroads in his career, Tom needed someone that he could really trust. You know, someone that would pour their heart and soul into the quality of the music, just as Tom was planning to do, as he always did. On paper, it seemed to be an odd couple to craft an album. I mean, Tom Petty is the iconic American rocker from Gainesville, Florida. Jeff Lynne, the symphonic pop auteur from Birmingham, England. However, because of their friendship and their shared vision, the pairing would prove to be a brilliantly calculated hunch. Jeff Lynne played really an invaluable role on nearly every aspect of Petty's debut solo LP, Full Moon Fever. Besides co-producing, he also co-wrote most of the songs for Tom's solo record, including the first cut on the album, a track called Free Fallin. The two superstars were getting into the zone to work on fresh material, and Jeff Lynne started playing elaborate keyboard parts. Tom Petty was jamming on a heavy guitar riff. Then he playfully transitioned his style. He started strumming three simple chords. Lynne suggested that Tom stop playing the hard stuff and just sing words to the pacing of those three chords. Petty came up with, "She's a good girl, loves her mama." Apparently did that just to make Jeff Lynne laugh. It was kind of a joke. And the song evolved from there. Good girl, loves her mama. To Petty's surprise, though, Jeff Lynne liked his silly improv. And I want to talk about that for a second. I want to bask in this. Tom Petty's laid-back, easygoing rendering of the song's first verse with the simple, clear strumming of his guitar, those simple chords, that's made every hair on my body stand straight up on every single listen of the classic since whenever I've heard it. It's just perfection. It's crazy about Elvis, loves horses. I don't want to start bawling before we get to the meat of this song, but oh, how my heart aches for artistry like this right now. Tom Petty is a legend's legend. His approach to this song's first few verses proves that we are certainly past the golden era of popular music, where someone just sat down to create music without a marketing plan, without a demographic report, without any preconceived notion outside of just making great music. Anyway, after Tom Petty got through the first verse, Jeff leaned towards him and uttered the words, "Free Fallin'." At that moment, Lynne came up with the title, but Petty had a difficult time finding the best way to sing the phrase. Petty played around with different ways of singing the title of the song, but on each attempt, he couldn't quite get the whole phrase in. I mean, you think about it, if you were to sing it yourself, it's hard. Lynne suggested that he raise his voice an octave, and on Tom's next try, he just sang free, sustaining the note. And then he sang Free Fallin'. And the two artists looked at each other and they knew that Tom had nailed the vocal for a chorus. I mean, just telling the story makes my heart swell with joy. The most appropriate title for a song ever, maybe, because that's exactly what this song does to your soul. Cast your worries aside and just free fall into a peaceful, easy feeling of pure rock and roll. Although the lyrics do tend to speak of, standing in the middle of freedom and regret. We'll get to that. But the music has always given me a release of just peaceful contentment. Free Fallin' could have been a straightforward slow song, but Jeff Lynne kept adding intriguing little touches, including the breakdown and the final verse that featured, cascading backing vocals and Phil Jones' steady drum tapping around Petty's wistfulness. That's how you take a 3-chord song and turn it into something just zestful and affecting. For a track that with such a simple 3-chord inception, Free Fallin' transformed into a composition that lyrically is a paradox of complicated emotions. The narrator is seeking his freedom by breaking the heart of a girl that he admits is a good girl with traditional values, but he struggles with his dubious character and the anguish that his actions have inflicted.
Move west down Ventura Boulevard.
All the vampires walking through the valley move west down Ventura Boulevard, and all the bad boys are standing in the shadows, and the good girls are home with broken hearts. Petty said that the vampires he referred to in the song are from personal observation. He reflected on occasions when he was driving down Ventura Boulevard in an area of LA called the Valley and seeing shadowy looking people just off the sidewalks, just beyond the reach of the streetlight people, just kidding, standing around the post office. He always thought of those mysterious shadow figures as vampires. Some of the lyrics are about the culture of Los Angeles, with Reseda, Ventura Boulevard, Mulholland, and it infers that LA people can use others sometimes to get what they want, hence the part about the narrator having just dumped a girl and doesn't even miss her.
I'm a bad boy, 'cause I don't even miss her.
Tom Petty, though, was born and raised, like I said, in Gainesville, Florida. He later moved to LA in '74 at the start of his career. Being an outsider with that perspective, though, was really important. He certainly used that in the song to great effect. Breaking up the chorus with free meaning to have freedom to do whatever he wishes or to be with anyone he wants, and free falling with the overwhelming fear of regret, like asking yourself, what have I just done? There's an element of that lost or out of control feeling. The song pivots away from feeling free and gravitates toward regret when the bad boy wants to fly back over Mulholland and win her back by writing her name in the sky.
I want to write her name in the sky.
Then there's this line in the final verse. I'm going to free fall out into nothing, going to leave this world for a while.
Gonna leave this world for a while.
That passage, though, has made me feel two different emotions, all depending on what I'm going through at the moment I'm hearing the song. Sometimes I think that the storyteller, he's so conflicted with his decision to mistreat his former lover that instead of feeling liberated, feels like he's spiraling, free-falling uncontrollably under the force of emotional gravity to fall rapidly to the reality of his true feelings. He has nowhere to go but down. But then at other times I've thought that the narrator is saying that with this experience that he's had an important self-realization. Maybe he understands that he needs to change something deep within himself for the better, and that that aha moment is a motivation to leave his current reality or the world for a while to go work on himself so that he can become the best version of himself for the long haul. I don't know. There's a real power in that type of transitional thinking, though. And hey, maybe it's a little bit of both. That's the greatest aspect of these great songs. We all have our own interpretation and take our own meaning from them. In fact, thinking about it, many times when I interview artists, songwriters, they're reticent to go into too much detail on the meaning of the song, what they think it is, because they believe that once they record the song and release it, it really ceases to be their song. It belongs to the listener or the seeker, and I love that. Petty and Lynne finished writing and recording Free Fallin' in just 2 days. The key contributors of this classic were, of course, Petty singing lead, backing vocals, 12-string acoustic, the aforementioned Jeff Lynne with the dreamy background vocals, also playing the bass and keyboards, Phil Jones on drums and additional percussion, and of course, the incredibly gifted Mike Cambell. He, of course, performed the 12-string electric guitar. As always, Petty's a stalwart, heartbreaker brother, Mike Cambell was a vital contributor to a Tom Petty composition, helping to develop Free Fallin' into a hypnotic ballad. Petty immediately took the rough draft of the song to Mike's house to polish up what would be the first fully completed track for Full Moon Fever. When the album was mixed and mastered, Petty turned the record into the big shots at MCA Records, and the label executives refused it. Yeah, you heard me right. They refused it. Can you even fathom that? I mean, Tom Petty was understandably shaken. He was very proud of Full Moon Fever. Since he was signed as a recording artist, Petty had never had his music dismissed by a label. I mean, obviously Tom Petty was a huge name. By 1989, he'd already had 3 platinum and 4 gold records with the Heartbreakers. He was one of the most popular rock artists in America. Not only that, Jeff Lynne was a revered artist and producer who was the frontman and lead singer of the Electric Light Orchestra. I mean, between 72 and 86, ELO had more combined hits in the UK and the US than any other band in the world. Can you even believe that? The dynamic duo of Petty and Lynne collaborating on an album should have had the MCA brass salivating instead of looking down their noses. Unbelievable. Full Moon Fever also boasted additional luster with fellow traveling Wilburys, legends George Harrison and Roy Orbison contributing their talents on several album cuts. But the extra star power apparently didn't even matter. MCA felt the music would not translate to a mass audience. Ironically, they were especially critical of Free Fallin'. Free Fallin', like I said, portrayed LA culture with Tom Petty singing about fabled locations in the LA area, the Valley, Reseda, Ventura Boulevard, the 101 freeway, and Mulholland Drive.
Living in Reseda, there's a free.
Why would the record-buying public in the Midwest per se care about living in Reseda, California? This was the label's psychographic nonsense. Petty was perplexed by the label's spurning, but he decided to wait it out. He'd actually heard that a new regime was soon to take over, and he would resubmit his record when they settled in. In fact, I read somewhere that Tom Petty he tells a story about performing this song on a pivotal night in his career. Apparently, he went to a dinner party with George Harrison and Jeff Lynne at the home of Mo Ostin. Mo Ostin, who was the head of Warner Brothers Records at the time and one of the most famous record men ever. Harrison had them break out the guitars and they played Free Fallin', which of course everyone thought was amazing. When Petty explained that it wasn't good enough for his label, Ostin offered to sign him and put it out. They did the deal, but it was kept secret until Petty fulfilled his commitment to MCA. But in the end, Mo Ostin didn't have to put it out because in 1989, management changed at MCA and the new regime liked Full Moon Fever and released it. Although while MCA left him in limbo, he teamed up, like I said, with Lynne, Harrison, Roy Orbison, and Bob Dylan to form Traveling Wilburys, and that first record sold 3 million copies. Imagine that. Of course it did. So again, the new MCA regime loved Tom Petty's album. It was the same record the old dogs passed on, but the fresh blood had nothing but enthusiasm for it. Free Fallin' was the 3rd single released from the LP, and it became the biggest solo hit for Tom Petty and his highest charting single since with the Heartbreakers in '79.
Good girls home with broken hearts.
Free Fallin' was a #1 track on the mainstream rock chart. It was #4 in New Zealand and #5 in Canada. The single defied gravity. It ascended all the way to #7 on the Billboard Hot 100 in early 1990. And over the years, it has risen all the way to #1 in our hearts. Full Moon Fever was a huge triumph for Tom Petty and Jeff Lynne, selling more than 6 million copies in America and over 6 million worldwide. Free Fallin' was featured prominently in an episode of the hit series The Sopranos in 1996. The track was placed in the Cameron Crowe film Jerry Maguire in a spirited driving scene. Sports agent Jerry Maguire, superbly played by Tom Cruise, is just exhilarated over a handshake deal that he made with the father of a young football player who is projected to go #1 in the NFL draft. And he is wildly turning the radio dial, to find that right song to express his elation. When he tunes in to Free Fallin', he shouts out the chorus at the top of his lungs. Free Which is exactly what we all do when the song comes on. I mean, I'm sure you're the same as me, but whenever it comes on, it just envelops my being. It just crashes waves of joy across my senses. I remember in the 8th grade, oh man, after football practice. Yeah, in 8th grade I played football, or rather I sat on the bench the whole time. But I remember after practice, I walked to a nearby store called All America with all my friends, and there were some girls there, one of whom I'd had a crush on for ages. I remember one of my friends told me that this girl all of a sudden liked me too, which was news to me because I didn't even know that she knew that I existed. He told me, or maybe he dared me, that I should kiss her. To this day, I have no idea how I mustered the courage to do this, but we were walking back from the store, and I think I'd bought her drink for her, and I remember all of us guys got Jolt Cola. Remember that? And maybe it was the caffeine, but I looked into her eyes and met her halfway. She came the rest of the way, and I kissed her. Only I didn't know how to kiss a girl, so it was more like a toilet plunger kiss, I felt like the biggest dork, but I remember her eyes got really big and she blushed and she like whispered, "Wow." I was bewildered because I couldn't believe that the girl of my dreams up to that point said, "Wow." By the time I walked back to where my dad picked me up, we were officially girlfriend and boyfriend. As I got into my dad's truck, I was just in a daze. My dad was listening to Full Moon Fever. He's a huge Tom Petty fan. And as we pull out of the junior high parking lot, all of a sudden Free Fallin' was playing. And I asked him to turn it up, and I remember we both sang it to the top of our lungs. Yeah, I'm free! And the exhilaration of the experience that I just had, combined with Tom Petty's luxurious rock classic, made for a Hall of Fame memory from my first decade and a half on this planet. And since my dad has passed away about a year and a half back, that memory has become even more invaluable as I regaled him with the tale of my first kiss as we drove home, and that feeling of innocence from, I can feel it right now, from a long time past. When Petty died tragically in 2017, fans of all ages celebrated his deep repertoire, making Free Fallin' the #2 most streamed song on the Spotify Global Viral 50. I mean, it remains a classic of the popular music canon. It'll continue to electrify generations. The Professor of Rock community will definitely pay tribute to the preeminent Tom Petty, spotlighting many more of his timeless classics in future episodes, I can promise you that. I mean, Tom Petty is one of those rock stars like David Bowie, Prince, Eddie Van Halen, where you just felt like you lost a loved one. Their music has always been a friend to us. By the way, the #1 song the week that Free Fallin' peaked at #7 was How Am I Supposed to Live Without You by Michael Bolton.
I'll be honest with you, I love his music. I do. I'm a Michael Bolton fan. For my money, I don't know if it gets any better than when he sings When a Man Loves a Woman.
Regardless of its eventual peak position, though, Free Fallin' is #1 in our hearts and reminds us that music is subjective. Unless we're talking about the late, great Tom Petty. I mean, he is an artist that we can all agree on. Yeah, I'm free. Leave us a comment about this classic song and about Tom Petty. What are your memories of his music and what other songs by him should we cover? Tell us about your undying love for Tom Petty. He's just so amazing. I do want to thank our sponsor, Zenni Eyewear. Make sure to check out Zenni.com, where you can not only design your own frames, you can also do a virtual 3D try-on to see how you look before you buy. Tell you what, I'm wearing the blue ones today. I love these things. Go check it out. If you want to be a part of our community, if you like this content, we invite you to subscribe. Make sure to get Tom Petty's classic music on our Amazon links below. Until next time, 3 chords and the truth, my friends. Stay safe out there.